This is the all-new City. We agree it doesn't look very sporty and it doesn't have earth-shattering output figures either. In a sense, it is your everyday premium car that's meant to be hassle-free and comfortable. But that doesn't mean that it can't be fun to drive. Welcome to Carwale's Driver Car series, a series wherein we take regular everyday cars and cars that have shown us a bit of sporty intent, and then we show them a few corners, we drive them a little harder than necessary and see if we have fun doing it. The all-new City is a 3-box sedan that competes with the Hyundai Verna and the Maruti Suzuki Ciaz. All three cars have similar engine capacity, but the City is the most powerful of the three. It comes with a 1.5-litre 4-cylinder engine, it has variable valve timing and lift, and it makes around 120 bhp of max power and 145 Nm of peak torque. The engine is mated to a 6-speed gearbox, which then drives the front wheel. The all-new City has simple underpinnings as well. It uses McPherson struts up front for suspension, while the rear is an even simpler torsion beam axle with an anti-roll bar for better body control. Braking duties, meanwhile, are handled by ventilated discs up front and a set of drum brakes at the rear. But it is the weight, or the lack thereof, which gives the Honda City an added edge. It weighs under 1200 kg even for this fully spec'd ZX trim. And yes, before we forget, the all-new City in this trim is priced at Rs 15.4 lakhs on the road. Now it's time to go and have some fun. Now let's begin with the heart of the matter, the engine. Now we've already told you what the specs for the engine look like, but it's a naturally aspirated engine, and there is a sense of purity to a naturally aspirated engine compared to a turbocharged one. Now turbocharged one, when the power comes on, it's like a slap in the back and it's all very exciting and all, but the naturally aspirated engine, especially on the City, it builds up revs, it builds up the performance linearly and potently. So the higher you go up on the rev range, the nicer it gets and the more pulling power it has. Now if you're watching this, you probably love driving, and when it comes to the City, the best way or the best part to use in the engine has to be between 4 and 7,000 RPM. Now I know it sounds like a lot, but that's where the City's engine feels best in the top end. So it makes the right noises, you've got lots of pull coming in. Now we've dropped under, so we're at about 2000 RPM. I'm fully floored, but it's a slow acceleration, right? And then when it hits 4000, it starts to pick up a bit, but it really comes on song past 5000. So I don't know whether you can hear it, but now we're in the 5000 to 7000 zone. So not only does the engine sound good, but you've also got, the throttle response is a lot more alert. You can balance the car better, especially when you're in a corner at these RPMs. So you can modulate the throttle better on and off a little to set the right balance. And that's what's, makes this engine really, really entertaining. It's not the most powerful engine in its class, agreed. Actually, it might be. But it's not like a great figures, output figures aren't great, but the way it comes on when you enjoy it, when you drive it between 5 and 7, I think it's an engine that is likable. You end up enjoying it when you rev it. So I quite like it. I mean, it's a nice thing. Now what good is a great engine without a nice shifting gearbox? Now on the City we've got a 6-speed manual, and it's got these short throw slick shifts. It falls into place beautifully, it falls to your hand nicely, and there's no click-clack noises coming in, but that it's going to fall into place every time you shift. There's barely any play. and that also adds to the precision. So you can just, it's 6 speed, so you've got nicely balanced ratios, but you can keep going up and down the gearbox just for the fun of it. Quite enjoyable, the gearbox as well on the City. Now when you get a manual, I think it's equally important, apart from getting nice crisp gear shifts, precise gear shifts, I think it's also important to have nicely spaced floor pedals. On the City, you have pedals which are not too wide apart, they're not too close, they fall very naturally to your feet fall very naturally to the pedals, and the travel for the clutch, travel for the throttle again isn't a lot, so it's comfortable and it's fun to use. The brake, there is a bit more play than we would have liked. It goes in, but it doesn't go in all the way, and so that still allows you to use a bit of heel and towing if you wish to. And heel and towing itself, I think, has plenty of advantages. The two that I like or work for me, you can have smoother downshifts, more precise downshifts. It's good for the engine, for the gearbox, they say. And of course, it's a lot of fun when you get it right. There are times, and in my case, I think majority of the times I don't get it right, but when I get it right, it just feels really nice. And to be able to get it right, especially for amateurs like me, I think it's good to have good pedal position, and that's exactly what the City has. So it's good. The thing that we're not completely happy with when it comes to the City's driver focus is the steering. Now, it's not a very, very quick steering. It's almost 3 turns lock to lock, and it's a little slow right off the center. So you put in, but I mean, the moment you turn your steering, the car doesn't respond as quickly as you would like. So you need to put in a little more of the steering lock to get it to do your bidding. And that can get a little tiring after a while. Also, the steering doesn't have a lot of feel. And of course you get used to it eventually, but that connect, you lose some amount of connect when you're driving, because I mean, it's like if you were to, I don't know, use a old school video game, that sort of thing. So that feels important. But it's a precise steering, so in a way that it might be slow off center, but every time the same amount of dial in of the steering will give you the exact same results. So in that sense, it's precise, and so that allows you to place the car precisely in a corner. It takes a little bit of time to understand where, when, how much you need to put in, but you can do that. And wish the steering was a little quicker, wish there was a little more feel, but like I said at the start, you do get used to it, so not so much of a worry in that sense. Now let's get into the handling bit of the car, and I'm going to split it into 3 parts. I'm going to talk about the turn-in, I'm going to talk about how it feels mid-corner, and then of course the exit. Now, the turn-in on the City does take a little getting used to, because courtesy the slow steering, the first initial movements of the steering don't yield too much in terms of wheel movement, and so you end up putting in a lot more lock, and then suddenly either the car ends up understeering if you're carrying a little more speed, or it just runs into the hedge or the grass because it just catches on. So it takes a little bit of getting used to, but once you get used to, then yeah, you know how much to dial in, and then things get better. And once you get used to that and you follow the slow in, fast out approach, then the turn in actually is quite good. So you can just chuck it. You need to put in a little more effort, but it bites, the front bites, and then it just catches on and you're in. So turn in wise, takes a little bit of getting used to, but once you do, then the city feels nice and predictable and fun. Now let's talk about mid-corner balance. Now mid-corner balance is very important, especially for a driver like me who is not very precise with turn-ins every time. So you end up feeling the need to adjust when you're already committed into a turn. And in that sense, the city does really well. You can balance it off throttles, especially if you're keeping it between 5 to 7. The steering, once you get a hang of it, you can make adjustments mid-corner and keep the balance. And even if you chuck it hard into a corner, you can, I mean, it moves very slightly to the side, but it's very controllable. And even your quick direction changes, it doesn't seem to flip-flop and feel unstable. It's quite blunted in that sense. So I like the mid-corner adjustability on this car. The only problem I have is sometimes you would want to enter a corner harder because you can, and you'd want it to have like a slightly loose tail to be able to do that, so you don't understeer into a hedge. This has ESP and it has the option of turning it off, but even after you press the button and you do it, it still stays on. And that's irritating because being able to switch it off would have allowed the keen drivers to exploit what the car can do a little more. So that's a slight miss, I think, and it's not really an intrusive ESP, but it's there, right? So it adds a bit of unpredictability to what's happening, because you plan that the car will end up in a particular way, but it doesn't, because the ESP is working, has its own brain. So that's that. Now, when it comes to the third part, of course, of handling is corner exits, and we spoke about wider tires. Also, it runs basic suspension, which is what you get in the class in any case, and it's got anti-roll bars. But it allows you to get on the power as soon as you're at your apex or sooner, and it's very rare that you will find the tire spinning up and you're not being able to put down power. So that's also, it helps in overall the whole driving feel of one being able to connect the corners in a quick, fast fashion to enjoy the drive. So yeah, so that really works for that. The final ingredient that makes a good driver's car is braking. The city uses ventilated discs at the front and a pair of drums at the rear. It's not a fantastic setup in terms of, let's say, compared to discs at the front and discs at the back, but it's pretty potent, no doubt. Now, when it comes to the bite, the progression, the feel, the city brakes are, they're usable, they're pretty good in these three aspects. The only issue, so to speak, is the amount of play that the brake has, which I think we spoke about a little earlier. And that means in the city, you might have to use it, you'll have to get used to it, but when you're driving hard, when you're driving fast, then you're already using the brakes more aggressively. And when you're doing that, then they don't feel all that slow or sluggish. And like I said, there's good feel in the brakes, so you can modulate the brakes even mid-corner, and it doesn't upset the car in any way. So you won't have the tail hanging out, or you won't find it locking up the front, or being generally unsettled in a way. What we would have liked better, though, is the intrusion of the ABS comes in a little too early. And so when you're braking hard, when you're getting really hard on the brakes, you want the ABS to back off a little more, so you can carry a little more braking, let's say, into a corner, so you can tuck the front in a little more. But it comes on, and so you suddenly find that the car is again washing wide, because it's just going grab, release, grab, release, grab, release. So you have to work around that. Just like the ESP intrusion, which is a little which you can never turn off. The ABS also is something I think that could have been a little more lenient, and it would have added a little more flair or interest for the driver in the city. But like we said, brakes in terms of saving you, they'll do that. They bite well, and you can trust them and lean on them quite a bit. So what do we think of the city as a driver's car overall? We spent all day around a bunch of twisties today, and I've had a good time. I think you can, I don't know if you could tell, but I enjoyed myself. There are a few things that are lacking or could have been better on the city. For instance, like we just mentioned, maybe the ABS intervention could be, it could come in a little later. The ESP, you can switch it off, but it doesn't really turn off, so it should ideally turn off when you have given a button and it says ESP off, so it should have been off. So it would have given the keen drivers a little more flexibility. The steering could have been, it could have a little more feel, it could be a little quicker, but again, you do get used to it eventually. But otherwise, I mean, in terms of grip, in terms of feel, in terms of predictability, in terms of how the engine behaves, I love this naturally aspirated engine, and it allows you to heel into it. The gear shifts are crisp. So overall, like say you get out over the weekend and you want to drive fast, I think, or you just want to have fun, the city allows you to do that. I mean, it might look like a car that's built for luxury and dreaminess, but I like this car when it comes to being a driver's car, totally. So yeah, if you like driving, get the manual petrol, it's nice.